New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
Free my mind, open my heart with the whispers of truth, to live a conscious life, to live a conscious life on the growing edge, on the growing edge.
And now, here's Allie.
Hello and welcome to Growing Edge Live. I'm Allie Benjamin, and it is my great joy to be here. If you're here for the first time, I'm so glad that you came across Growing Edge Live, and I know that today's guest and the conversation we have will touch you somewhere in your heart, open your mind, and have you consider dimensions of life and beyond as maybe you haven't before. And if you're back, I'm so glad that you're back. You know that every Monday, or just about, we pop on live and share wonderful conversations with amazing people that have channeled their time, their talent, their energy, their resources, their love, their creativity into doing really great work in the world. And we are sponsored by the Satya Center, which is a center in northern Utah. And we are produced by New Thought Media Network. And I'm so grateful for both organizations. And I'm so glad that we get to have a conversation today with an amazing woman. I've known her for a couple of years now. And we don't know each other very well, but we've met a couple of times at Unity Village. And we just came back from a retreat, the Affiliated New Thought Network retreat at Unity Village at the beginning of October 2025. And I met Joy, and so I'm going to read her bio because it's so rich and I couldn't remember all of it. So it is my honor to introduce today's speaker, Reverend Joy Fletcher, a fifth-generation truth student and ordained divine science minister since June 22 of 1995 at the Divine Science Church in Denver, Colorado, known to many as Reverend Joyful. I love that. She is the president of Divine Science Ministers Association and an active leader and faculty member with the International New Thought Alliance, the Affiliated New Thought Network, Divine Science Federation International, and First Spiritual Church of Bay City and Samaritan Institute. Whew, that's a lot. That's a mouthful. That's a lot of work. Reverend Joy has served as a Unity spiritual leader in both Muskogee, Oklahoma, following the legacy of her great-grandmother, her 2X great-grandmother, and at Unity Church of Flint, Michigan. She is a beloved guest speaker, teacher, and sacred space holder whose ministry bridges legacy and love with wisdom and presence. In her nearly 2 decades of end-of-life ministry, she has walked beside hundreds in their final chapters as a hospice chaplain, bereavement coordinator, and grief recovery specialist. Yeah, I'm interested in knowing more about that. With almost 600 sacred rituals to her name, from weddings to baby blessings to celebrations of life, Reverend Joy brings a rare depth of compassion and spiritual clarity to every ceremony. She is the author of Beside Myself with Joy and How to Create a Ceremony Ministry, and a contributing writer in Phenomenon News and Works of Heart. Phenomenon News. She is co-host of Divine Science Everywhere, a spiritually expansive broadcast on New Thought Media Network, and was a featured guest also on the New Thought Media Network program, New Thought Today. Reverend Joy believes the awareness of divine science everywhere, in all, through all, is the radiant thread that inspires every step of her ministry. So please help me welcome a woman whose presence is a blessing and whose message is sure to touch our hearts today. Welcome, Reverend Joy.
Thank you. Thank you. It's wonderful to share this space with you. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, it's really lovely to share Growing Edge Live with you and to be here on the very green growing edge of our own becoming. Last week, I was on your show, Divine Science Everywhere, and that was a beautiful, that was a real blessing and a gift for me. I'm so used to being the host, so to be the guest was unexpected and a real delight. And I realized that I shared a lot of the things that are alive within me now that I don't typically share on this show. And so for those of you that would like to watch that, you can find that on YouTube, on New Thought Media Network, their channel. And so, yeah, go find that. Anyway, today we're here for you. And I'd love to get to know you a little better myself.
Yes.
And I'd love our guests to know more about you. I love to have guests on that are steeped in metaphysics, in their own spiritual journey, in supporting others. And so I'd love to know, where did all this start for you? Did you always know that you wanted to walk alongside people in this way? Were you a child that was curious about this, or was it something that occurred a little later on in your life?
That's a good question. And when I grew up, my family didn't talk about death. And things were rather vague. And I actually remember visiting my paternal grandparents, and I was probably less than 8 years, around 8 years old, and walked into my grandparents' home. And my grandmother was standing at the door, and typically my grandfather would be standing behind her with a big grin on his face. And I said, "Well, where's grandfather?" And my grandmother said, "Oh, he went away for a while." And that was it. And then I put two and two together. My parents experienced a miscarriage, stillbirth rather, when a little bit after that. And then a great uncle died suddenly. And it wasn't talked about. It was just kind of hush hush. So I think that facilitated some of that to be different. And I chuckle to myself sometimes. I think, and here I am in the midst of addressing my own mortality, walking with other people, and that sacred passage of their life. The same thing about speaking. I was raised that children are to be seen and not heard, and was not encouraged to express my opinion. And I love to read, and I feel that I still love to read. Part of it was a form of escapism, to have my nose in a book. And I remember in junior high, I would walk back and forth to school and be reading a book. So, and if I was reading and I'd see somebody that I saw coming toward me, I'd cross the street. That is not me now. Not at all. So that's amusing to me. And it is also encouraging to realize that we can push through those self-imposed barriers. We can. And the messages that authoritative figures plant. So when I was in high school, I took a nursing assistant class because I had a vision of going into the medical field. And I really wanted to be either a gerontologist or a pediatrician. So I took this nurse's aid class, and I also took some aptitude tests, and I went to, I saw one of my counselors, and she was encouraging but discouraging. She felt that my science skills and some other things weren't very compatible in the medical field. And I took that to heart in many ways, even though later I thought I'd be a nurse and other things. But I use this class as nursing assistant um, as a way of, I guess, introducing myself to the medical field. And then I got a job in California, and they used to call nursing homes convalescent homes. And the first Saturday that I worked, in these situations are often short staffed, there was a death. And I had never, ever done anything like this before. And some of my coworkers were just mortified. And actually, I was nervous too. But I stayed with that individual in the room, and I didn't know consciously what I was doing. And I remember that the room had a glass window that looked out into the hall, and there was a curtain, and there would be people, other staff members that would peek in and watch me. They didn't have within them, I guess, the oomph to go in there, but I was, and that stayed with me. And so I just became more and more acquainted with that. And I worked in uh, acute care in hospitals as a nursing assistant for quite some time. And then later I quit and had a family, moved to Michigan, had a family, and did a lot of volunteer work, in the community. And all of it was preparation for what I'm doing now. And I think that's an important thing to remember too, that everything we do has its purpose. It may not make sense at the time, but it does. All the way from recruiting people to volunteer with me, like walkathons or fundraising or other activities like at my boys' schools and Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts, Red Cross. It helped, and to become more comfortable with talking with people and learning how to listen and not just tell my story, although that became more developed as I got older. And then my late husband died suddenly, actually, through suicide. And that was really difficult to adjust to. I was 39, and it was difficult. And I do remember a conversation with him because I was studying for the ministry toward the last part of his life. And I was excitedly telling him about different things that I was looking forward to doing and things. And I remember he said, and he kind of stopped and hesitated, almost like choked on the word. And he said, "You mean you might do some people's like funerals?" I said, "Well, of course, that's part of ministry." But boy, it sure opened my experience. And then when I moved to Oklahoma and was the spiritual leader of the Unity Church in Muskogee, I walked with other people as they were experiencing the end of their life. And I just would feel myself being drawn to call them or to make visits like I did when my boys were growing up too, if I would hear about someone going through a challenge. So I know that universe was preparing me for what I was destined to do. And so we walked through that. And then when I came back to Michigan, I took a course at a hospital called Clinical Pastoral Education. And that's pretty intense, a lot of self-reflection, working on yourself. That really helped a lot. And I continue to keep pursuing other processes for my own self-discovery. And I also was a chaplain at this hospital. So I dealt with that, death and birth, all the way from stillbirth, miscarriage to other ages. And one of the things that the chaplain was tasked with was to sit with the families and not only support them, but also help them to decide on a funeral home and things like that. I had never done anything like that, but it was all part of that. And also, I would be paged to go to the emergency room if they had a particular crisis. And I recognized that I was not only there for the family, but I was there to be a presence for the staff. And also, when a doctor would have the conversation with the family about talking about removing life support or about a condition of their loved one, they would often ask the chaplain to be part of that. And I watched varying degrees of the comfort level of the medical staff. And it was really interesting. And so often the staff would talk about the terminal illness or making the decision about removing life support. They would say that and then bolt out of the room quickly. And then there I was with the family. So I'm not saying that I'm 100% comfortable, as a human. And yet I know there's something stronger within me that knows just to be there, just be a present. I don't need to talk. I don't need to ask, I don't need to tell my story. Occasionally I do a little snippet if it feels intuitively like it will support them. But primarily you're there to be a listening presence, to be an active, empathetic listener. Just be there in that space with heart and openness.
Gosh, there's so many things we could go down a lot of different rabbit holes with all that you've shared there. We'll probably circle back to some of them. So as a child, were you, in your family of origin, were you religious? Was that you? In your bio, we hear about 7 generations. I mean, that's amazing. Can you speak to that and what specifically you feel your ancestors sort of passed off to you, or maybe called you to in your ministry?
When I was very young, we attended Unity Church, and when my parents were still married, and I remember thinking as a child, like, how am I supposed to say it? Am I supposed to say what I really want in a positive way, or do I affirm it that what I don't want? I remember thinking about those conversations. So it was there. And I'm just so very blessed because in the Unity movement, years ago, there's some individuals that were very well known and respected. Dr. Sue Sicking, who was at Unity of Santa Monica in California. Out of her 4 children, 3 of them became Unity ministers. And my parents went to high school with the children. And then Margaret Butterworth, who was Eric Butterworth's sister, was best friends with my great-grandmother. So I would hear these little stories and, you store them. You don't realize at the time you're storing them, but it was really interesting. And I do remember feeling connected at times. And then, there were times that I would get too in my head and I would forget my source. And sometimes as an adult, I do that too. But I always felt that there was something. And even when I would be alone, it was interesting because even if I hear a clock tick or other sounds, I would imagine it to be like a rhythm, a connection to source. And quite fascinated with clouds, watching the shapes and imagining what they look like. I feel truthfully in past lives that I was very spiritually connected. I feel very connected to Catholic, the ritual, and other faiths. When my mother remarried, her second husband, we were forbidden to have any contact with the Fletchers. So hence Unity as well. And then when they divorced, my great grandmother and my grandmother came back into our lives, and my great grandmother encouraged us to start attending the Unity Church in Anaheim, California. As it turned out, I was the only one that continued, and I walked every Sunday. I loved it, and I attribute that in many ways that organization, that fellowship, the teaching saved my life. I mean, it was so important to me, so important, that feeling of that connection. And I didn't realize the family connection till much later.
Mm.
And I became very active in there and became, a leader, and was able to attend the Youth of Unity conference my first time in 1969 at Unity Village.
Wow.
And when I was there, and I had told my grandmother that I was going by telephone. And when I was there, I just felt like I should check for the mail for me. And there was no human reason for me to consider getting mail. I mean, it just was out of my, but intuition. And sure enough, there was a letter from my grandmother. And she wrote in this letter, it occurred to me that you are the fifth generation to have ever attended a conference on Unity grounds. And she said that my second great grandmother attended before there were any buildings and there were tents, and that if I went to the library, I would see pictures of what it was like. And I did. And then she had a little graph and showed when my great grandmother went, she was able to accompany Margaret Butterworth when she was studying to be a minister, because Margaret was part of leadership for Eric, and Margaret's mother, May Butterworth, was the one that established the Compton Unity Church, and she died. So Margaret was thrust into the ministry, and she had to take classes. So my great grandmother would go with her. So she considered that the highlight of her life, according to my grandmother. And then my grandmother attended conferences, and my dad attended a YOU conference. It was really cool to see a picture of him in a Hawaiian shirt and things like that. One of my sons and my grandson have been on Unity grounds, and the grandson was with my husband and I when we attended a conference there. So, but I knew that there was something, and took my children to a Unity church. They attended Unity Sunday school, and I taught Sunday school. And my eldest grandson attended Unity church at times. And so I was always searching, and I've always been fascinated by other spiritual customs, the customs of cultures. And I just feel that there's some past life connection too, that is part of it.
Yeah. So. Wow. That's a phenomenal and very rich history within Unity, New Thought, and, weaving in divine science within all of that. Your family has been such a rich foundation for you and continued resource, I would imagine.
Yes.
Yeah. So, past lives, that's interesting to think. We were just on Unity grounds, and you've had so many of your family on the grounds, whether you were there or not, at other times. How do you feel when you're there now? Is there a sense of their presence?
Yes.
And you know, I'm just wondering, what was your takeaway from a couple of weeks ago when you were there, and we all heard that Unity and CSL and Anton, the affiliated New Thought Network, are going to be doing some work together, and in the new year, and so it's sort of a full circle moment, you know. And so, what did you take away from your time there at Unity, knowing that you have a feeling or an awareness around past lives, and knowing that your ancestors have also been in that space?
I love it. I love going there every time. I never tire of it. And I think I've probably attended about 20 conferences over my life. I am just so blessed. And just savor the rose garden and the tower and hearing the carillon, you know, the bells, and reminiscing. You know, I tell people that, and my husband's heard this story more than once, about where the Unity Inn used to be, you know, and this building wasn't there, and you know, walking to where the cottages are that we used to stay in, and over there was the Wee Wisdom School. It was still there when I attended. Myrtle Fillmore had this vision of teaching young people, you know, the Unity principles, as May and Margaret Butterworth did too in California. And going to participating in Silent Unity, and just all of that. And this year, I deliberately, when we walked to the labyrinth, that labyrinth ritual, deliberately thought of my ancestors that had been there and carried them with me. Oh, I'm getting emotional about that. It was so powerful to look up at the sky and walk those steps in just a meditative, connective way. It was incredible to me. Incredible. It really was.
Beautiful. Well, we are going to take a little break. Can you believe it's been half an hour already? And we will be back in just a couple of minutes with more of Joy's story.
Please help us say thank you to our organizational sponsors, including the Hefferland Foundation, Affiliated New Thought Network, International New Thought Alliance, Science of Mind Archives and Library Foundation, Center for Spiritual Living Denver, Center for Spiritual Living Midtown, New Thought Philadelphia, Planned Happiness Institute, Summit Center for Spiritual Living, One Heart Retreats, Center for Spiritual Living on the Lake, Unity Kitchener, Unity Spiritual Center Ottawa, Om Center for Spiritual Living, Satya Center, Begin Within Ministries, Center for Spiritual Living North Jersey, Unity of Savannah, and the Center for Spiritual Living Seattle, as well as all of our individual donors. Thank you for being part of the New Thought Media Network. Please like, share, and subscribe. New Thought Media Network, positively inspiring.
New Thought Media Network is on the rise. We're looking to grow with you. Do you have technical media experience? Or perhaps a desire to learn? Are you willing to volunteer your precious time and attention? We share this message to benefit all. If you possess a computer with a camera and a microphone, we will share our knowledge with you. Behind the scenes or being the star, let us bless our one. Contact us at info@ntmedia.org.
Free my mind, open my heart with the whispers of truth. To live a conscious life, to live a conscious life on the growing edge. On the growing edge.
And now, here's Allie.
We're back with Joy Fletcher. Welcome back. There's so many things that you talked about that light me up, and I see that we've got several things in common. We've talked about Michigan. I'm not from Michigan, but I have some family that was. Then I was unaware of your California contacts. I moved to California when I was 14 from England and lived on the coast in South Laguna. And so we have some, we've been in that area, that space, and now here at Unity. So we have some threads too. I love to see how my guests' lives kind of interweave with mine. Mm-hmm. You also talk about being there in the hospital setting with individuals, the nurses, the staff, the doctors, the families, the patients. And I too have my son was ill for a few years, and we lived in hospital. And he was one of those patients that was supported by the hospital and the staff and the chaplains. And it's so meaningful, it's so helpful to have spiritual care within that setting when your family member or yourself is going through something that is potentially, not coming home. Mm-hmm. And to have that kind of support and to bring that extra dimension of the presence of God into that space and into the hearts of people is such a gift. And so thank you for doing that work. And I too have a couple of family members that chose suicide. And that is such a dark space and a difficult experience to have as a family. Mm-hmm. And to have support through that is I can see why you do the work you do, having had personal experience, and to be able to support people with your ministry. And I'd love to talk a little bit about that, and maybe even bring in some of your experiences. My husband was a hospice chaplain for a number of years, and he's very tuned in and had some very phenomenal experiences with some of his patients, his clients that were transitioning, and the experience they were having. And it's extremely, it's a rich time to be so close when the veil is so thin, mm-hmm. and to have that support of creating a spiritual energy or vibration, or having someone that's holds such knowing and such wisdom and such a presence. And so I'd love to hear some of your experiences, because in this culture we don't talk about death so much. We don't, oftentimes our elders or those that are in hospice, people find it difficult to be with family members. And so I'd love for you to share some stories or some insights that can help people see, and this isn't a strange word because we've been using it a lot, but see the joy in that can be there if we have the eyes to see and the heart to receive it.
Thank you. There are so many special stories. One that I feel I want to talk about is there was a African American man that had life support, and the doctor had talked to the family about removing the life support, and there was some family discord, and it often, in situations like that, often amplifies. So I was introduced to daughter and other people there. And then moments later, a woman came in and they introduced me to him, and it was his partner. And she was just distraught and crying and saying things that I miss this and I miss, certain dishes that you cook, and I wish you could come home and things. And she was brought there by another gentleman and of African descent, and he had this most beautiful orange suit on with matching hat, dapper shoes. I mean, it was just amazing. And I'll get to that part of the story in a minute. So anyway, I allowed space for emotions to be expressed, and then I asked his partner to walk with me down the hall. And we got down the hall, and there was a little bench, and we sat down, and I said, just, as she was crying, and I just reached out and touched her, and I said, "It's time to let him go." And she looked at me with such innocence in her eyes in a way, and she said, "It is?" And I said, "Yes. It's time for him for us to let him go, and the medical staff doesn't feel that he can survive." And so she agreed to it, and she cried some more, and then we stood up, and she just grabbed me, and she kissed me on the neck, and then she said, "I love you." And that amazed me because I had just met this woman for the first time, and her she was sad, but yet the energy shifted. And the idea that she would trust what I said, it was so powerful. So we walked down to the room, and the nursing staff, turned off things, and then the machines kept going for a while, and then he slipped to the other side. And then I talked with the family, and including the gentleman that had brought the girlfriend. And I said, I noticed his suit and I thought it was really beautiful. And he said, "Yes, I dress like this to honor my friend." And I noticed that he was having a little difficulty walking, and I said something, and he said, "Well, I had to shovel the driveway by hand first, and I think I made my back sore." And I'm just so touched that he would do that, and he wasn't a young person, and then went to the effort of honoring his friend by dressing that way. I mean, it was Sunday best. I mean, it was just very, very special to me. Very special.
Hmm.
Another time when I was working at the hospital, I pushed the button for the elevator, wasn't paying attention to what floor the door opened, and I jumped out, and it wasn't the floor I thought I was going to, but the door was closed. And so I turned around to push the button, and the elevator didn't come. And then I noticed one of the other chaplains, a nun, and said, "Oh, I am so glad to see you." She says, "I was in an important meeting with this family, and I received this page, and there's someone, an urgent need for a chaplain on such and such floor. Would you do it?" I said, "Okay." Right after that, the elevator door opened. So I went to the nursing station, and they couldn't remember the person's last name. And I walked into the room, and my golly, that was someone that I had known. I bowled with the family on a bowling league like 10, 15 years earlier and had not heard from them. And here their loved one was in the bed. So just provided support for them, and it was a urgent need and things. Another time I was called to the ER, and it was Thanksgiving Eve, and a young woman had her 3 children in a vehicle and got in a car crash, and the middle child was killed, but she didn't know that. And she was in a hospital bed because she had minor injury. And then her husband arrived, and they had some family history, and so they had been separated, and she had another relationship, and that was the middle child was the result of that, and then they came back. And he said, "The Lord works in mysterious ways." Just that's what he said. And I had to accompany him, and I say had to, but I accompanied him when we went in the room, and she had to tell him, or he had to tell her, that the little boy had died. That was hard. That was hard. Another time was hard when I was called to support a nurse that was working, and to accompany a police officer. They pulled her into a room and accompanied a police officer while he wanted her to identify her son that was killed in a car crash, and that was very challenging too. I was both times I was associating with my own feeling as a mother. I know that, and which is good in some respects because you can empathize, but on the other hand, there's that the inner strength that you need to call up and not let yourself get caught up. I'm not saying if there's anything wrong with a tear or something, but not have a real intense cry, in that moment. It's not, as a chaplain and a spiritual leader, I don't feel that's appropriate.
Yeah. These are all like devastating scenarios and experiences that obviously you carry with you.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure, as sad as they all were, there's also a gift for you as someone that's holding a space, being the presence, being a presence, and officiating too, like your husband had said. You all do funerals and memorials, and what a blessing that we have in our culture support that in this way. What would you say to individuals? Because the people that are watching either live or will watch this at a later time, all of us are going to experience loss. And from my experience as a minister and hearing of my friends that are in chaplaincy, or my husband being also in chaplaincy, I know that family members find it difficult to know what to do when a loved one is ill, terminally ill, or in hospice, or there's been an accident. What would you say to those that are watching that find it extremely difficult to be with people that are in that sort of challenge, having that experience? Because you mentioned that even you can shed a tear or feel these big overwhelming emotions, but there's something within you that is able to, I wouldn't say disregard, but ride that wave
Yes.
and be there, and that can be very helpful to the one that is transitioning, and for the family member or the loved one that is there that finds it hard. So are there some things that you counsel family members of people that are in this situation?
Well, sometimes we have a conversation about their relationship. Sometimes grief is directly related to unhealed aspects of the relationship. And so they may not want to let go of that individual because of the unfinished business. So we talk about that briefly, and I do offer grief support too, both in the hospice world, but also as myself through joyfulcircle.org. But we talk about the relationship and their belief about what death is, and versus if it's appropriate, like at what point is our medical interventions doing more harm than good, and then also asking them about their faith foundation. What do they believe about death? What do they believe about what happens after? And then also identify what kind of inner resources they have. So those are just little highlights
Yeah, really
of what
helpful.
to do.
You also do, or a practitioner of the grief recovery process. And this, I know a little bit about it, and this is something that you offer, and people can find you on your website at
Yes.
joyfulcircle.org. Can you share, because now we're talking about how to deal with big emotions when your loved one is still here and making their transition. And you also deal with family members afterwards when they are in grief. Can you share a little bit about why that's so important, and what happens when someone consciously grieves?
I think it gives you a lighter feeling, and it helps you to be more present in your current relationships and in your life, instead of like right after it happens, well, they're gone, and then you think that that's not affecting you, but it does affect the choices that you make in your day-to-day living. How engaged are you going to be in your own life? Do you have trust in your relationships, because maybe you have a fear that they're going to leave or something like that? Or maybe there is situations where there's some unforgiveness, both towards yourself, like coulda, shoulda, woulda, versus the other person. And so it can be very freeing for you to address grief and to work with that. Yes.
So powerful. So what is your ministry becoming? Here our title or our name is Growing Edge, and we're all growing, we're all changing, we're all transitioning, and we're always expanding in consciousness. And so currently, where are you on your evolutionary edge? And are there things that you're looking forward to doing moving forward? And I would imagine, because of your deep experience with people that are transitioning or have, or that this gives you, you know, a lot to think about as far as your own life, your own mortality,
Yes.
what you're going to do with this next chapter of your life.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd love to hear about what's on your growing edge.
After the first of the year, I am offering series of classes, both virtually and in person. I'm a graduate from the Conscious Dying Institute in Boulder, Colorado, and so I'm a sacred passage death doula and a end-of-life coach as well as practitioner. So I do provide education about that, help people define what's really important to them so they can live. There's a 6-week series class that helps you focus on what's really meaningful to you in each of the domains of your life. And the idea is that you start this class thinking that you might only have 90 days to live. And so you decide what's important to you.
Wow.
And set goals. And people find it very helpful. And it helped me when I had to take it so that I could facilitate it, because it gave me more motivation, more energy towards doing, living my life. Is actually, in some respects, it was very freeing. Instead of someday I'll do this or someday do that. And it just wonderful. And then it encourages them to have conversations with their families. So what are your wishes? Or are you going to leave it to chance and expect your family to deal with that, with a sudden change, dramatic change, and not know what you wanted, to second guess, like, do you want life support or not? What kind of service do you want or not? And that kind of thing. That's a very simplified version of it. Some people I've worked with said, I've always wanted to go to Hawaii. I don't know why I haven't. And da-da-da-da-da. So we talked about that and set the goals, and, how to set that up and move toward it. And that person said that felt very freeing and exciting too, to talk about that. And having conversations about people about unhealed aspects of the relationship, or even writing a letter and maybe not sending that letter, but getting it off your chest. So I plan to do that, as well as I do right now currently work with individuals for grief support. And I've helped countless people with their advance directives and other important decisions. And I would like to, I do actually provide end-of-life education. That's sort of related to the 6-week series, as well as grief support in the community. And I am in the process of creating a presentation. It will be online, about grief and the holidays, how to address that, how to kind of find a different way, or a different way to adjust your holiday, how to honor your loved one while still honoring yourself through the holidays, is a very simplified way. I'm refining my books and coming up with other ideas, and I enjoy guest speaking at metaphysical churches and situations, seminars, and such.
Where do you live in Colorado currently?
I live in Michigan.
Oh,
but
you do?
I took the class virtually. From Colorado, yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
So we are just approaching the Thanksgiving season and Christmas season. And I know that many people have, at our center, and other New Thought centers in this area, they have a celebration, like a blue Christmas, where there's more of a ceremony or a ritual of some sort to for those that aren't feeling all the joy and the light and the celebratory energy that others are. And so what would be some advice or suggestions for those that maybe are going to be having Thanksgiving or Christmas or whatever celebration they may be having over this season without their loved one for the first time, whether it be a child or a spouse or a grandparent or parent. I know for our family, when we lost our son, it was the holidays weren't something we were looking forward to. There was something in us that felt like we had to have a celebration for the sake of our children and our other children and grandchildren. But it's hard to because it seems like the loss of them or the absence of them is so profound during high holy holidays or special celebrations. So what can you say or share with us for those that might be experiencing that this year?
Well, self-care is really important. If you don't feel like having the same kind of celebration or acknowledgement, don't. Maybe streamline it. It depends on where people are with their grief. Sometimes people feel comforted, and it's challenging at the same time, bittersweet, but maybe set a place for their loved one at the table when they have dinner. Tell stories about their loved one. Maybe put a picture up and, or creates like a little altar, or give to charity in their name, or donate, your time. And just, we keep our loved one alive by talking about them and acknowledging them. Yeah. And at the same time, I want to emphasize self-care. If you need to trim it down and not, bake the 12 kinds of cookies that you used to, it's okay. It's really okay. It really is.
Well, thank you, Joy. Thank you, Reverend Joy, so much for all of your heartfelt wisdom and your joyful presence. And I look forward to seeing you again, maybe next year at the Anton retreat.
Yes.
And thank you to everyone who joined us today. We really appreciate you and send you lots of love wherever you are. And thank you to New Thought Media Network. Bye-bye. See you next week.
Thank you.
Free my mind, open my heart with the whispers of truth, to live a conscious life, to live a conscious life on the growing